Okay, ladies and germs, this is Aaron the Pedantic. We are looking today at The Thief in Old School Essentials. First, I'm going to just go over what does the book say, and then we're going to shoot the breeze about what that may entail, what you may want to do instead, all that kind of stuff. So let's just get into it. The Thief. This is a very controversial class when it was introduced. If you've never experienced BX or Old School Essentials, I'm hoping that this will give you some perspective on how the mechanics of the Thief interacts with the rest of the game and the culture of play and all that kind of stuff. So first off, you see that there are no stat requirements for the Thief. You could be as terrible at anything as you would like. It's all perfectly fine. Your prime requisite is dexterity, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who's ever played any form of D&D. That being said, it's perfectly doable to have a thief that has a terrible dexterity in this game because ultimately that's really only going to affect your missile attacks. And if you use dexterity-based ability checks, which typically won't. Anyway, so... it will affect your armor class, and that is actually a big deal. So, just kidding. Okay, your hit die is terrible. It's 1d4, so just as bad as the magic user. There were a lot of retro clones and games that have been made based off of BX that have bumped it up to a d6. I highly believe in this move. A D6 rather than a D4 for Thief. I highly believe in that to be a thing that is a worthwhile endeavor because this makes them very, very, very fragile. In BX, you die when you get to 0. End of story. This is kind of bad whenever your starting range of hit points is probably going to be anywhere between 1 and 4. So. Maximum level's 14. It's the same thing with all of the human classes. Yes, humans are the ones with the classes. Armor is going to be leather and no shields. So leather is going to give you an armor class of not much. It's going to give you just a little bit. I believe that in Old School Essentials, that's going to give you a 12. Now, just so that I know that I'm not lying... 12. Yeah, so 12. That means that if you have a perfect 18 in dexterity without any kind of magical adjustments. Okay, and let me amend that. This is with ascending armor class. One of the features that's really kind of neat about Old School Essentials is it does have ascending armor class, so you can use that. But this basically means that the highest AC that you can have without any kind of magical effects is a 15. Which is not great. It's okay, but it's not great. And you definitely don't want to have lower than average dexterity. You don't want to have any penalties to dexterity as a thief. I know that I'm countering what I said earlier, but it's just one of those days. So that's something here to be noted is if you do use the rule of you can lower stats in order to increase your prime requisite stat, you cannot lower strength as a thief. So just remember that. It's I think it's an optional rule. It is an optional rule to begin with. So you don't you get what you get typically. But if your table is cool with that rule, just know that it recommends that you don't let them lower their strength. So that you don't want to have any noodly armed thieves necessarily. So your backstab ability, this is the thing that if you talk to people who play the more recent editions, they're going to talk about expertise and they're going to talk about sneak attack. Backstab, the implications of backstab are really kind of So basically, you have to be attacking an unaware opponent. So that's the first thing. From behind, second thing. And you get a +4 bonus to hit, and it doubles any damage dealt. So here's the thing. If you are running the kind of game that I do, where the thief is going to be, the party is going to be underground in dark places most of the time with creatures that don't rely on light, then that means that this is going to be almost useless. Almost. Because of the fact that whenever you are using a torch to see, which you should, because you don't want to fumble around in the darkness, that increases the likelihood that you're going to be caught by surprise. And it increases the likelihood that you're going to trigger a trap. Then that means that you are, probably going to be spotted. Pretty much if my players are using torches, unless the creature is blind, then there is no surprising them typically. So, or at least it's going to be incredibly unlikely. So that means that your unaware part is probably not going to trigger. So from behind, of course, this means you need to have good positioning. So there's another layer of an issue. Even if you are, in a place where you don't need a torch, it's not really a big deal, and you can pop out and attack them, then you still need to be behind them. I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to have. I would be willing to just say if they're unaware, period. If they're just unaware, it doesn't matter if from behind or whatever. I would be willing to do that. The reason that I'm willing to do that is that I'm okay with emphasizing positioning a little bit less in that capacity, especially if you're using longer rounds. In this edition, a round is 10 seconds, which is kind of in that range where I'd say, okay, positioning might be a little bit more. The simulationist person in me says that might make a little sense. If you look at AD&D, your round time is a minute. So at that point, it's kind of like, okay, it's not as if you were standing in the same spot for an exact minute. So to do all of that exact positioning for flanking and all that kind of stuff, I'm not really sure that I buy into that. But if they're unaware and you're attacking from behind, you get a +4. A +4 is nothing to sneeze at. Now, if your thief can somehow perceive that this creature is there, so let's say that they are fumbling around in the darkness and they hear the creature, then they can maybe attack them in the darkness. And here's the thing. I don't believe that in BX, and now I'm going to check it real quick because I really don't like misleading people. I don't believe that you can attack. I don't believe there are very specific rules about whenever they are. You can't see somebody. Gonna check that real quick because what I've been doing is referencing the fact that whenever you attack something that if you're blind, look at that, unable to attack. That is blindness. But as far as can't see, nothing. So what that tells me is they would probably go with this. Now, this is an inferior rule. I will just flat out tell you, this is a bad rule. I do not like it. It makes zero sense. If you were hemorrhaging from, like if you're paralyzed by the pain that your blindness is giving you, okay. But if you're just blind, there's no reason why you can't swing wildly in the direction of whatever noise you're hearing. There's no reason for that you can't do that. So I highly recommend that you pull the rule from AD&D, which is that if you cannot see, you get a -4 to your attack. You get a 4 penalty to your armor class, and you get a 4 penalty to your saving throw rolls. That's what I recommend. You do with it what you want, but that's just my recommendation. What that would do, if you incorporate that means that the thief can attack as normal in darkness. To me, that makes a lot more sense, because otherwise your thief is going to be only really useful if they've got light, which again, that means that they are giving away their presence most of the time. unless something is absolutely not paying attention or can't see the light or sleeping, something to that capacity. So doubles damage dealt, this there's no legalese here. You do double damage. So the way I would interpret that is, let's say you're using a longsword, and by the way, you can use any weapons, period. So this puts them on par with the fighter with regard to what weapons are at their disposal. They can use bows, they can use slings, they can use two-handed swords. And in fact, if they don't use two-handed swords, then I question what they're doing with their other hand. Maybe they're holding the torch. That makes perfect sense. Maybe they're holding something else that they need. Maybe they're holding oil flask, a lamp, who knows? But they've got two hands, and they're not going to be using them for shields. So to me, that means that they should probably be using the biggest thing that they can swing, unless they have something better to do with their other hand. They do have skills, so this means that there may be reason for them to not use a two-handed weapon, but at the same time, that's just what I would do. So again, this also means that if you find some kind of magic weapon, the thief can use it. No doubts whatsoever. The thief can use it. So use it. This really, really ups their game. This is the thing that really messes them up, though, is that 1d4 hit die. Serious. The early levels are just very punishing. I have killed so many thieves just because of that 1d4 hit die. So that means that, if they're using a long sword that has, some kind of magical properties, and it has an additional +5 to damage, and, they roll an 8 on their damage hit, then they're doing 13. You double it to 26. That's just how it would work if you pull off this maneuver. But it's not going to happen much. It's not going to happen a whole lot, just because of the fact that it's so risky. And I'll get to that in a minute. So they use this explanation here because of their need for stealth and free movement. They cannot wear armor heavier than leather and cannot use shields. There's your explanation right there. I would not be upset if you or anybody else said, I don't see why thieves shouldn't be able to use shields. I don't see why thieves shouldn't be able to use heavy armor. That's fine. Maybe they should use those things whenever they're in some kind of pitched battle and they know that they're going to be fighting, and they know that they're not going to be stealthy, and they know that they're not going to be doing any kind of these abilities. Then there's really not much of a good reason why they couldn't. It's not as if there is an immense, even if there was an immense amount of training required to use heavy armor, which I don't believe that that's the case. I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. So that's just me. I don't have any problems with the thieves being able to do that. It would kind of start encroaching on the fighter, sort of, up until the fighter starts breaking away with their increased THAC0, rate of increases and all that kind of stuff. But that's just, it is what it is. So if you're worried about that, maybe keep them at a D4. But a D6 is really quite, a D8's a lot better than a D4, and it's a little bit better than a D6. So here's this ability. A thief of 4th level or higher can read non-magical text in any language, including dead languages and basic codes. So this is it's a pretty incredible ability. This is your Indiana Jones character. You're going into these crypts, with these old civilizations, and you're able to read dead languages. Why? Well, we don't know exactly, but you can do it as long as you're 4th level or higher. Do I like this mechanic? I think that it's really pretty cool. I would be considering imposing some kind of granularity, maybe say that they can recognize the origins, perhaps, and they know how to find a cipher or something like that. Not that they can just do it, with 80% probability, it's a pretty high probability. If I have an 80% chance to hit, then I'm not really worried about missing that much. Same thing with this. If they don't succeed, they cannot try again until they reach a higher level of experience. You're going to see that again, which it's fine. So what that whole thing does is it just simulates the idea that this was beyond your capacity right now, but maybe later it'll click for you. And, it's not a bad way to do things. It's simple. And, it's just kind of interesting. But a lot of times people will try to find ways around it. Maybe then if you fail, they just, make a chalk rubbing of whatever it is they're trying to read. They take it out with them and then they spend, a week researching, trying to find a way to decipher it. If it's a dead language, maybe they can't do that even then, but So, scroll use is a 10th level ability, which means that it really doesn't matter most of the time. Some people will play at 10th level. I plan on letting people play at 10th level in my game that I'm currently running if they get there. But a lot of times 10th level means the game's over. A lot of times it means 9th level, the game is over. But if you play that far, there's a 10% chance that you will fail at casting arcane spells from scrolls. Nobody else can do that except for your magic users, and elves, but we don't talk about them. And so 10% is not that much of a chance of error. I played a cleric in AD&D for quite some time, and he had a 10% chance to fail his spell rolls. Basically, if you're spell casting, if your wisdom is low enough, then you incur a penalty that makes it where you don't automatically succeed at casting spells. And that was where I was at. So that 10% happened very infrequently. I think maybe 4 times out of, I cast probably 100 spells. And I think it happened about 4 times. Of course, law of averages, somebody else may do it and it may happen, 8 times or 12. But it's still just not. It's not a whole lot. Interestingly, though, the referee gets a little bit of purview to say what it's going to do, not just it doesn't work. They could make it backfire. They could make it do something weird. It just doesn't function as expected. It could be an unusual or deleterious effect. So. Now we get into thief skills. Like I said, this is the thing that really threw some controversy whenever it came out, because people didn't think that you needed such a thing. A lot of people refused to use skills, period, in D&D. They would rather just handle it by question and answer, just talking things through, stating their intent, maybe using some kind of probability rolls, which, at that point, you're kind of getting into skill checks anyway. But, all the previous stuff, before you start involving dice, or you could just say everybody can do this. It just really depends. So we're going to look first at the definitions, and then we'll look at the chart. So climb sheer surfaces. The emphasis is sheer. So this isn't just, they're going to climb up a steep hill. Maybe one that has plenty of footholds and all that kind of stuff. If that's the case, you probably don't need to roll at all. There really shouldn't be a reason for it. If it's something that any normal person should be able to climb, and I say normal as in, like a competent person, not necessarily somebody who's like never been outside before. But, if most people should be able to pull it off, then why have them roll? This is sheer. So with this skill roll, they can climb 100 feet straight up a surface. Where it says nothing about tools, nothing about anything like that. This is just them acting like a cat. I'm trying to watch my language for this one. So, just climb straight up. If you fail the roll, you fall at the halfway point that you were climbing up. So that might be, if you're climbing up a 300-foot wall, to me, that means that that you fail the first roll, you fell at 50 feet. If you failed the third roll, then you fell at 250 feet. And then you're going to take 25d6 points of damage. That's how I would handle that. If you're going up a 25-foot wall and you fail, then you fell at the 13.5 mark, which is basically 10 feet. So 1d6 points of damage. But I would like to reiterate that if you're not going just straight up, then that you probably don't need to have this check, period. Sometimes people implement checks when they don't need to. I'm guilty of that as well. So I'm not like preaching from above, at a pedestal. This is me also attacking myself. So find and remove treasure traps. Treasure traps. This is important. There are two kinds of traps in BX. You can look them up. There's room traps and there's treasure traps. This is for finding and removing treasure traps. So what does that mean? That means that you can find a trap that is on a treasure and remove it. You have to succeed to find it. You have to succeed to remove it. This is not very likely starting out. You may be very fortunate to find it in the first place, but you're going to be really lucky if you manage to disarm it. So what does failure mean? Well, failure means a lot of this stuff is just open to interpretation. To me, if let's say you fail to find the trap, okay, it looks clear. Now, how does this interface with a player who's asking the right questions? Maybe they say, I shined some light into the keyhole. Do I see anything out of the ordinary? Maybe then I would say, okay, you see you can see there's a broadhead dart, that's facing straight out of towards the keyhole opening. Then, they might be like, there's a trap here. We don't need to roll, do we? We don't need to roll. But if they just say, I want to check for traps, okay, then make the roll. So it's going to depend on how you want to portray this with your DM, how your DM wants to have this happen in the game. Some people don't like to sit there and have the discussion about what exactly you do, and that's fine. I like doing that. Some people like rolling the dice and just kind of wincing whenever they see that they roll poorly. I will say that there's nothing wrong with a DM actually rolling this for the player, because the player's going to know if they roll the magic numbers or not, because there's a such and such percentage chance to succeed, so they need to roll that or lower, right? So, for instance, it's a D100. If you roll a 15 and you're supposed to get a 10, then you failed. If you rolled a 15, you were supposed to get a 20, you succeeded. So some people will say, just let them do it and then let them live with the consequences. You can do that. You can just tell the players, look, you made the roll, you failed. You got to live with it. You got to act as if you don't know that you failed the roll. Some people will say, just let them roll, even if there's no point to the roll. There's all kinds of ways to skin that cat. I will say that me personally, I tend to roll detection things myself, and then I let them roll. I would probably roll the remove trap as well, honestly. One of the things that I can do, because of the fact that I use I use Discord and I use a dice bot, is that I can take a screenshot of my rolls, so that if they say, I don't believe you, I can just point at it and say, look, this was when we were rolling for it, and this is what it rolled. So, and this is the timestamp. There's some people that actually can look into that channel because they're also referees. Anyway, that's beside the point. All kinds of different ways to handle it. But just note that it says treasure traps. Does this mean that you can't use it on a room trap? So a room trap would be like, you got a tripwire in a hallway. You've got, a pressure plate. You've got any of that kind of stuff. Technically, it sounds like no, it has nothing to do with those. So how do you deal with those? Well, you might toss something on it. You might trigger it. You might cut it. There could be any number of ways that you try to handle the trap. But according to this, the skill doesn't have anything to do with it. If you were to use this skill in order to let them handle room traps, I'm not going to get mad. I think that the reason that it focuses specifically on treasure traps is because treasure is supposed to be the thief's gig. Not so much architecture and, trapping rooms and things like that. Even though I could make an argument that it would be just as important because they may be used to having to navigate through booby-trapped areas, But that's what the rule is. So you do what you want to do with that. Hear noise. So in a quiet environment, not in combat, a thief may attempt to listen to a door or hear the sounds of something, such as a wandering monster approaching. So again, this is a detection roll. I will often roll this myself behind the screen as the DM, just because of the fact that if they roll a 6, they know they failed. And that means that, whatever I tell them, they know not to believe. So what I will often do is I will roll it behind the screen. You can do whatever you want. You can have them roll. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if they are going to be willing to commit to their role and say, okay, guys, it's clear. Most players will. Most players will go along with that. I just don't like to kill the suspense. So, that also means that whenever they succeed, then they might feel too relieved, perhaps it's like it's clear, coast is clear. Then if they know that they succeeded because they rolled a 1, then we might get kind of it might relieve the tension a little bit too much. I like to keep the tension up. It's all about what you want to do with the game. Hide in shadows. So very specific, requires the thief to be motionless. Attacking or moving while hiding is not possible. So if you are hiding in shadows, then this is just you hiding in shadows. If you are going to attack, then you may utilize a moving silently roll if you are trying to get up to them. If you are attacking with a bow and arrow from the outskirts, well, so does this mean you can't attack because you're hiding? What exactly does this mean? That's really, I think that's poor phrasing. I know that it's not like great to criticize exactly BX, but I think that's poor phrasing on my part, because the way it makes it sound like is, well, you just arbitrarily you just can't do it. Or the moment that you attack, you're no longer hiding. Well, does that mean that you're, can you catch them unaware? Do you need to make a move silently roll? Because this is only for attempting to sneak past enemies unnoticed. But yeah, speaking of, move silently. Move past enemies unnoticed. Once we get to the percentages, you're going to be very depressed for thieves. Open locks. This is the thing that is probably the thing they're most known for, but this is the thing that they're most useful for to start with. Open locks. So you have to have thieves tools. They're not terribly cheap, but you buy them once and you're good. You can only try it once per lock. This is something that whenever you look at this, coming in from new school eyes, it's kind of flabbergasting. That's not why. What? You just get one chance? There are a lot of people that interpret it a lot of different ways. Not necessarily interpret. They just decide to do things differently because there's really only one way to interpret this. You only can try it once per lock. That's very definitive. If they fail, then they cannot try it again until they gain an experience level. So it's just like with the other thing where doing this, getting your level up is kind of like saying you've progressed in your abilities. Now you can go back and try the things that you couldn't succeed at before. Maybe you're better at doing those now. Maybe not. I think it's a perfectly good way to simulate that. Some people will say that if you have a thief that is just going to fail at picking locks, then how useful are they really? And the fact of the matter is that there are usually other ways than to succeed with the opening locks. Open locks is the quiet way. It's the way of doing things without spending a whole lot of time, without having to find a key, without having to find a way around, without alerting any nearby enemies. It's the quiet way. So if you can have a thief who can pull this off, then they can get you to the goods without drawing too much attention or wasting too much time. So it's a valuable skill, even if it fails often. But that being said, there are a lot of people that will say, maybe I'll let them have 3 tries. Maybe I'll let them alter the percentage chance based on what they do, how they describe things. Maybe I'll alter it based on how complex the lock is. That's one of the things that BX really pays no attention to, is how complex is the lock. It's kind of like, somebody's going to call me out for being completely wrong on this, but it's kind of like the Schrodinger's cat thing, where it's both a complex and simple lock at the same time, depending on what you roll. So, you could have a level 1 thief that could pull it off, and then you could have a level 14 thief that could fail. It's an interesting thing, but fact of the matter is it will work the way it is. You can change it if you don't like it. There's nothing wrong with that. Pickpockets. So pickpockets has a little bit more math involved, not much. So if the victim is above 5th level, the thief's roll is penalized by 5% for every level above 5th. So this means that your character is not going to be able to go around and pickpocket, high level characters and take, really good stuff from them. It's an interesting precaution, but roll more than twice the percentage required for success means the attempted theft is noticed. So you can try and fail. I guess this would be like you're reaching in the pocket. You kind of move around a little bit. Then it looks like they're about to start turning around. So you withdraw. Then you act natural. No big deal. But then the referee should determine the reaction of the victim, possibly using the reaction table under encounters, or they just chop your hand off because you're trying to steal from them. So once you reach the 9th level, you can establish a thief den attracting 2d6 apprentices of 1st level. Please don't roll 2 1s. That would be very sad. These thieves will serve as the character with some reliability. This is an important distinction because I believe the clerics, their servants or followers basically are completely reliable. But the thieves have some reliability. However, should any be arrested or killed, the PC will not be able to attract apprentices to replace them, which infers that you should be able to attract apprentices to replace followers that die for other classes. It's just one of those things. A successful thief might use these followers to start a thieves guild. So it doesn't guarantee it, but you will get followers. It does guarantee that, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a thieves guild. That's going to take some development. So let's look at our thief level progression. Look at that. They are the fastest leveling characters in the game. They can get to 9th level with only 160,000 XP, which is, it's not nothing, but it's not as much as it's not as much as some of them, that's for sure. So their THACO increase is on par with the cleric, which again kind of makes me wonder why they went with the D4, but it's fine. So they're about as martially proficient as the cleric in that capacity. Saving throws are quite good, favoring saving versus death and paralysis and petrification. So that's neat, and they're not quite as bad at spells as the fighter is. So let's look at the success tables. All right. So here's your chart for how likely you are to succeed with your skill checks. So as I said before, climbing sheer surfaces, 87%. This is the thing that you were best at in the early levels. And that's a dang good thing because as you saw, with 1d4 hit points, falling 10 feet might kill you. So you don't want to fall, do you? So even I would have a figurative trampoline under you to make sure that you aren't going to just plummet to your death whenever you try to climb. But it's the thing that you're best at. Traps, 10%. So you need to make 10% 2 times to find and disable a trap on treasure, which it's incredibly unlikely. You're not going to be able to do that with any reliability really until you're up in, the mid tier of levels. Your hearing noise is fairly reliable to start with, and it only gets better. Nothing is ever completely reliable, except for arguably your pickpocket against the weaklings. Once you get to a certain point, you can just prey on everybody. Your hide and shadows. I couldn't remember what HS stands for. Your hide and shadows is awful. 10%. 10% to sit still in the darkness. I question that immensely. I'm just going to say it. I do question that immensely. There are a lot of these that if you change values on this table, I do not hold it against you at all. I'm just going to say it. I do not hold it against you. You're not really going to be reliable for being able to hide in shadows for quite some time. Moving silently, a little bit better, but still not great. So this is why I was saying your backstab is mostly useless for a very long time. At least by about this point, you might be able to pull it off with fair precision, and less than half the time, but still it's something. And you're going to have 6d4 hit points, with con modifiers included. So you may actually survive if they catch you. But if we're talking about this, having a 20% chance to sneak up to an enemy, and then you've only got 1 to 4 hit points, nah, it's not worth it. It is not worth it at all. Open locks starts at 15. So, this is where I was saying it's very unreliable for quite a while. It does catch up. Again, like this tier of thief is a very, very serious thief. They're very good at what they do. And you can accomplish a lot at that point. What people may want to consider is perhaps having a higher starting point whenever they create this chart, except for this. Leave that alone. But and this is fine. But as far as like this and these, you may want to boost those initial numbers and decrease the gain with every level. You may want to consider doing that. If you like to play at the lower levels and you don't really feel like getting up to this level, you may want to say, you know what? It's okay if they fail at these things. It's fine because they can use all weapons. And in that case, you may want to say, well, maybe they get that D6 hit die. That's maybe something I would do. Now, one thing that I would also consider is there are plenty of OSR rule sets that have pulled, thief skills, and they have redone them. Lamentations of the Flame Princess has a great skill system. It's just D6 based, and it allows the thief to decide, or the specialist in that system, to decide what's important to them, and then they can just level up, whatever skill that they want to get better at. It allows them to specialize. So, they can be a master lock picker, pretty quick. They can be incredibly stealthy. They can become even better at stealth kills because they get to increase their backstab abilities. There's all kinds of different ways to do this. And I would highly encourage, anybody who runs this system to feel free to make those changes, As it stands, not a lot of players like playing Thieves in my game because I'm running as written. So as written, there's not a whole lot to love until you get to later in their career. That's just fact of the matter. So that's really it. That's all I got for today. Hope y'all got something of use out of this. Why don't you tell me what you do with your thief? What do you do to make the thief more competitive? Do you do anything? Do you even allow thieves? Because a lot of people, wanted to just dump them because we're doing fine without them. Why did we need to add them? Why do we need to cut off the ability for fighters to do these things or magic users to do these things? Why do we need to section it off to a particular class? And I completely understand and would love to hear what you have to say about it. So that's it for today. Y'all take care and peace out.